All right, folks. It is 3 a.m. as I'm putting this together. I should be asleep, but alas, I am not. It's a great time for insomnia to kick in, too. I've spent the last 2 weeks on the road Tampa, Raleigh, Orlando. Conference season is off to a banging start, but sitting on planes and in cars for hours on end, followed by daily step counts that are triple the norm and late nights of networking and socialization, it really takes a toll. You would think that would put me to sleep with no chance of waking up at an ungodly hour like I did today. But no, I couldn't sleep for some stupid reason, so I came into my office, grabbed some protein and black coffee, and started reading. And now I am wide awake. Not because of coffee, because of the frustration. We talk a massive game in this profession. We constantly call for systemic safety. We attend these conferences, we write LinkedIn posts, and we talk about moving towards leading indicators, capacity building, and business impact metrics. But when it actually comes to write the peer-reviewed paper and measure our success, we default to the same lagging metrics that have been failing us for 50 years. We try to measure 21st century safety management with 1970s tape measures. Buckle up, folks. I'm wired. It's an all-new Prove It To Me. Welcome back to Prove It To Me. I'm your host, Dr. Matt Law. Let's get right into the news. I was reading the March issue of the Professional Safety Journal, specifically the Safety Matters section again, and a blurb caught my eye. It was about a new case study co-published by ASSP members Joshua Muskowski and Jeremy McCrane in the International Journal of Construction Management. The title is a mouthful. I had to record this at least twice. Investigating the impact of Army Safety and Occupational Health Management System implementation on safety performance indices. Case study of a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers district. Now, a lot of you know that I'm a Navy guy, but prior to my commission, I was enlisted Army for several years, serving in a role that required an ASVAB score much, much lower than what I actually obtained. Because of this, I feel like I've earned the right to say that my absolute first instinct when reading an Army study is to check if they stayed inside the lines with their crayons. But I will behave today. All inter-service rivalry aside, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, USACE, executes some of the most massive, highly complex, and hazardous construction projects on the planet. Their efforts to standardize safety across districts are incredibly important, and studying those efforts is vital. So, let's look at what Muskowski and McCrane did. They conducted a retrospective case study in 2024 of a single USACE district that was actively implementing ASOHMS. ASOHMS stands for the Army Safety and Occupational Health Management System. For those operating in the USACE world, this business process is defined in ES 16009, which is integrated directly into EM 38511, which is essentially the safety Bible for military construction. Now, before we look at the results, we need to understand what this system actually is and how it compares to what the private sector uses. I was recently putting together a presentation comparing ANSI ASSP Z10 and ISO 45001 to OSHA's recommended practices for safety and health programs. If you look at the DNA of the Z10 and 45001 frameworks, there are many similarities. Crucially, they are built on the continuous improvement cycle: plan, do, check, act. ASOHMS is in that exact same family. It is a formal, standardized framework designed to move organizations away from compliance only safety and towards system thinking safety. Like Z10, it demands top management leadership. Safety can't just be the safety officer's job. The district commander has to own it. Like ISO 45001, it requires deep employee participation. And like OSHA's recommended practices, it focuses heavily on proactive hazard identification and risk assessment before a shovel ever hits the dirt. It is a robust, systemic approach. It is designed to change the very culture and operational flow of a command. So, the researchers wanted to know, did it work? Did implementing this massive management system actually make the district safer? They gathered data on both employee and contractor incidents spanning the multi-year implementation period. They ran the numbers using descriptive statistics and correlation testing to see if there was a relationship between the degree of ASOHMS implementation and changes in safety performance. Here are the key findings they reported. Number 1, over the period studied, contractor incident rates generally decreased, with significant reductions from the first year to the last year of implementation. Number 2, there were moderate correlations between the progress of ASOHMS implementation and reductions in the accident frequency rate, AFR, and the total recordable incident rate, TRIR. Number 3, when they used rolling averages, those correlations strengthened. They found statistically significant relationships between ASOHMS progress and lower total incident rates. The authors concluded that this offers empirical evidence that formal safety system implementation correlates with safer work outcomes. Now, on the surface, this is a massive win. We want management systems to work. We want to be able to go to the C-suite, or in this case, the Pentagon, and say, look, we implemented the system, the rates went down, please fund us for next year. But here is where my 3 a.m. frustration hits a boiling point. We need to talk about the methodology, the metrics, and the severe limitations of this study. Let's start with the statistical analysis, specifically those rolling averages I just mentioned. The authors noted that when they applied rolling averages to the data, the correlation strengthened and became statistically significant. Now, for the non-statisticians listening, a rolling average, or moving average, takes a series of data points over a specific time frame, say 12 months, and averages them out, continually updating as new data comes in. It is a fantastic tool in finance to smooth out the noise of the stock market and identify long-term trends. But in safety, using a rolling average on incident rates can be a double-edged sword. Yes, it smooths out the variance. If you have 3 recordables in June and 0 in July, a rolling average makes the data look like a gentle slope instead of a jagged cliff. But smoothing the data can sometimes artificially force a trend line to look stronger than the raw data actually supports. You are essentially mathematically massaging the data to reduce the noise. And why is there so much noise in the data? That brings me to the fatal flaw of this study. The outcome metrics used to validate this incredibly complex management system were TRIR, DART, accident frequency rate, and SBLI. Do you know what SBLI stands for? Severity-based lagging indicator. I couldn't make this up if I tried. It is 3 a.m. and I am reading a study about a proactive, systemic 21st century safety management system, and one of the primary yardsticks they use to validate it has the words lagging indicator literally baked into the acronym. The authors explicitly acknowledge in the paper that TRIR, as a performance metric, has come under heavy scrutiny. They know the controversy, yet they still used it alongside their explicitly named lagging indicator as the foundational outcome metric for their statistical analysis. We have to talk about the University of Colorado study. If you haven't read Dr. Matthew Hallowell's 2021 paper on the statistical invalidity of TRIR, you need to pause this podcast and go read it immediately. It is arguably the most important safety paper published in the last decade. Hallowell and his team analyzed trillions of worker hours across thousands of projects. They didn't just ask if TRIR was a good metric, they asked if it was mathematically valid, and the math is brutal. They proved that the occurrence of recordable injuries follows a Poisson distribution. It is almost entirely random. They found that TRIR is not statistically stable. It has absolutely zero predictive validity for fatalities. Meaning a low TRIR does not mean you are safe from a catastrophic event. In fact, they found that you need roughly 3 million worker hours for the TRIR to carry any actual predictive statistical meaning. For most companies, or a single USACE district, you would have to combine a decade's worth of data to get a sample size large enough to overcome random variance. So here is the million-dollar question I have for this case study. If TRIR is primarily driven by random variation at the scale of a single district, how can we claim a statistically significant correlation between implementing ASOHMS and a drop in TRIR? If the yardstick we are using to measure success is mathematically broken, the correlation is an illusion. We are correlating the implementation of a management system with statistical noise. Imagine if you take a new vitamin supplement every day and then you roll a pair of dice. Over a month, you notice you are rolling fewer snake eyes. And then you publish a paper claiming a statistically significant correlation between your vitamin and your dice rolls. That is what we are doing when we use TRIR to validate systemic safety interventions on small scales. Let's dig into a few other limitations of the study that we have to consider before we take these findings as gospel. Limitation 1. It is a single case study. They looked at one U.S. Army Corps of Engineers district. A district in the Pacific Northwest might have an entirely different culture, different subcontractor pool, and different local leadership than a district in the Southeast. You cannot generalize the success of one district to the entire Army, and you certainly cannot generalize it to private industry. Limitation 2, the contractor factor. The study highlights that the significant reductions were specifically seen in contractor incident rates. We need to be fiercely intellectually honest about the contractor safety data, especially in government work. Here is the smoking gun of this study. The authors found a significant drop in contractor incident rates, but they found absolutely no significant difference in the USACE civilian employee rates. Why would a systemic safety system only protect the contractors? It wouldn't. But you know what does affect contractors differently than government employees? The fear of losing a $50 million bid. USACE employees don't lose their agency contracts if they report a twisted ankle. Contractors do. Did the management system reduce the occurrence of injuries, or did it increase the suppression of reporting? When we rely exclusively on lagging indicators, we can't tell the difference. Limitation 3. Correlation is not causation. The authors did not run a randomized control trial. They couldn't. This was a retrospective look at a district that was already changing. What else changed during that period? Did the district get a budget increase? Did they transition from high-risk heavy civil work to lower-risk dredging work? Did the local economy change, allowing contractors to hire more experienced tradesmen? The study design makes it very difficult to isolate ASOHMS as the sole or even primary driver of the lower rates. Now, I want to be very clear. I am not bashing ASOHMS. I'm not bashing the authors, Moskowski and McCrane. They are doing the hard, necessary work of trying to evaluate our practices, and they utilized the data they had available. They also rightfully call for future research, and this is where we need to direct our energy. The authors suggest that future studies need to look across multiple districts to see if this trend holds up. They acknowledge that we need to look beyond just the incident rates. If we truly want to evaluate a management system like ASOHMS, ANSI Z10, or ISO 45001, we have to evaluate the system's outputs, not just the lack of negative events. We need to open the black box of safety that we talked about back in episode 204. Instead of tracking TRIR, we should be tracking things like hazard mitigation speed. When a high energy hazard is identified, how many hours or days does it take to implement a higher order control? Things like quality of pre-task planning. Are job hazard analyses just pencil whipped, or are workers actively altering the plan based on daily conditions? And things like leadership engagement. How many hours are project managers spending in the field having two-way safety dialogues versus sitting in a trailer reviewing metrics? Those are the metrics that tell us if a system is actually alive and breathing. TRIR is just the shadow on the wall. So, what is the practical application for you today? If you are a safety professional listening to this, and you are currently going through the blood, sweat, and tears of implementing a new safety management system, do not hang your hat solely on your TRIR going down. Because if it goes down this year due to random variance, you will eagerly take the credit. But when it randomly regresses to the mean and goes back up next year, despite your system running perfectly, the executives will look at you and demand to know why the system is failing. You trap yourself in a corner you cannot math your way out of. Track the capacity you are building. Track the systemic changes. Let the lagging indicators do what they do, but do not let them define your success. All right, the coffee is gone and the sun is starting to come up. I am going to wrap this up and stretch my back out. If you want to read the full case study, and despite my criticisms, I highly encourage you to read it and understand their methodology. The link is in the show notes. As always, if you have research you want to share, a topic you want torn apart, or if you just want to argue with me about statistics, send me an email at contact@proveitpod.com. Until next time, I'm Dr. Matt Law. Stay skeptical, stay rigorous, and stay safe, everyone. Prove It To Me is produced by me, Matt Law. Original music by Wes London. You can find this podcast on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. Like what you've heard so far? Please like, subscribe, and follow wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Got questions about what we talked about or research that you want to share? Send an email to contact@proveitpod.com. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and its guests and do not necessarily represent the official position, opinion, or strategies of their employers or companies. Examples of research and data analysis discussed within this podcast are only examples. They should not be utilized in the real world as the only solution available, as they are based on very limited, often single use case, and sometimes dated information. Assumptions made within this discussion about research and data analyses are not necessarily representative of the position of the host, the guests, or their employers or companies. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, mechanical, electronic, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission of the creator of the podcast. The presentation of the content by the guests does not necessarily constitute an active endorsement of the content by the host.